Virginia kept a number in her head every single morning for 2 years. 10. She counted the steps from the edge of her bed to the bathroom doorway, not because she was afraid of falling, not because the path was unfamiliar. She counted them because they were the worst part of her day, and she wanted to know every morning exactly how many steps stood between her and the moment the pain would start to ease. 10 steps every morning for 2 years. What she didn't know, and what nobody had told her, was that those 10 steps were trying to tell her something that had nothing to do with age. Before anything else, I want you to think about this morning, the moment your alarm went off, or the moment you simply woke, the decision to sit up, the pause at the edge of the bed, the first contact of your feet with the floor, and those first steps. Were they easy? Or was there a stiffness, a grinding, reluctant resistance in your joints that took several minutes to work through, a hardness in your ankles, a tightness across the solace of your feet, a feeling in your knees like they needed warming up before they were willing to cooperate? If you know exactly what I'm describing, here is the thing that most people never hear. That morning stiffness is not the price of sleep. It is not the inevitable tax of getting older. It is information. Specific, readable, actionable information about what is happening inside your joints and your circulation during the hours when you are still. And the moment you understand what it's actually saying, the morning stops being something to endure and becomes something you can change. What you're watching right now told you something true. She counted those steps every morning. Here is why, and here is what she did about it. Virginia is 68 years old. She lives in Mississippi. She is not someone who talks about pain. Grew up in a family where you worked through things, where mentioning physical discomfort was considered an indulgence busy people didn't have time for. She carried that through a career as a hospital administrator, through raising 2 sons mostly alone after her divorce, through decades of early mornings and long days. Virginia did not talk about pain. She managed it. So when the morning stiffness began, 2 years ago, gradually, then all at once, she managed it the way she managed everything, quietly, privately, with a system. The system was this. She would sit on the edge of the bed for exactly 3 minutes before standing. She had timed it. 3 minutes of preparing herself for what the first steps would feel like. Then she would stand and walk, counting. 1. The ankles protesting. 2. The soles of her feet stiff as leather left in the cold. 3, 4. The knees joining in. 5, 6. Beginning to ease slightly. 7. Something releasing in her hips. 8, 9. Approaching something closer to normal. 10. The bathroom doorway. By the time she reached the bathroom, she was functional again. She would look in the mirror and think, okay, another day. She never mentioned it to her sons, never mentioned it to her colleagues. At her annual checkup, when her doctor asked how she was feeling, she said, good, just fine. Because by the time of any appointment, she had warmed up hours ago. The stiffness was gone. And Virginia saw no reason to bring up something that had already resolved itself. This went on for 2 years, until the morning her colleague James arrived 4 minutes early to pick her up for a meeting and found her still in the middle of her 10 steps. In the car, he said, Virginia, how long have your mornings been like that? She looked at him. Like what? He was quiet a moment. Then, "You were moving like my father did before his hip replacement. I've known you for 11 years. You don't move like that in the afternoon." Virginia looked out the window, and for the first time said the number out loud. 2 years. Here is what happens inside your joints during the hours you sleep. And this is where most people are completely wrong about what morning stiffness actually is. They think it is the body creaking with age. They think it is simply what happens when you stop moving for 8 hours. It is more specific than that. And more important. When you sleep, your joints produce less synovial fluid. Synovial fluid is the natural lubricant that allows the surfaces of your joints to move against each other smoothly. During the day, movement stimulates production. At night, stillness reduces it. By morning, the fluid that remains has thickened slightly, become more viscous, less effective as a lubricant. The first steps of the day are made on joints that haven't been properly lubricated since you stopped moving hours before. But here is what most people never connect. The stiffness is made worse, significantly worse, by inflammation. During sleep, your body ramps up certain inflammatory processes, part of its normal overnight maintenance cycle. In a body where chronic low-grade inflammation exists, which is most bodies after 60, this overnight inflammation cycle produces measurable increases in inflammatory markers in the joint tissue. You wake up into the peak of that inflammatory cycle. The stiffness you feel in those first 10 steps is not just reduced lubrication. It is inflamed joint tissue at its morning maximum, being asked to move before it has had the chance to settle back down. Stop. A 2021 study published in Arthritis and Rheumatology found that morning joint stiffness lasting more than 15 minutes in adults over 60 was associated with significantly elevated systemic inflammatory markers and predicted a measurable decline in joint function over the following 2 years if the underlying inflammation was not addressed, not if the stiffness was ignored. If the inflammation was not addressed. 2 different things. Virginia had been managing the stiffness, counting through it, working around it, without once addressing what was actually producing it. The rheumatologist asked Virginia the same question James had asked. How long has the morning stiffness been present? About 2 years. And how long does it last each morning? 10 minutes. Maybe 15. The doctor made a note, then said something that Virginia wrote down on the notepad she always kept in her purse. Morning stiffness that lasts more than 10 minutes after the age of 60 is not a normal finding. It is a clinical signal. It tells us that the inflammation in your joint tissue is not resolving overnight the way it should. The stiffness is the symptom. The inflammation is the condition. And the condition responds to intervention. Virginia looked at the notepad, read it back. So the 10 steps, that's not just age. It was never just age, the doctor said. It was always inflammation. And inflammation at this stage is something we can work with. Virginia sat with that for a moment. 2 years of 3-minute preparations, 2 years of counting to 10. 2 years of good, just fine at every checkup. Because she had been managing the symptom instead of understanding the signal. 4 things, specific, targeted, addressing the inflammation, not just the stiffness. The first was movement, before the first step. Not after getting up, before. Lying in bed, before sitting up, Virginia began rotating her ankles, bending and straightening her knees, flexing and pointing her feet. 2 minutes, still horizontal, still warm under the covers. This stimulated synovial fluid production before the joints were asked to bear weight, primed the lubrication system before the demand arrived. By week 2, the 10 steps had become 7, not pain-free, but noticeably shorter. The second was anti-inflammatory nutrition taken with her evening meal consistently, turmeric with black pepper, half a teaspoon in warm milk before bed. The curcumin working overnight during the exact hours when the inflammatory cycle peaked to reduce the joint tissue inflammation that made every morning harder than it needed to be. A 2019 meta-analysis in BMJ, Open Sport and Exercise Medicine, found that curcumin supplementation significantly reduced morning stiffness duration in adults with joint inflammation within 6 to 8 weeks of consistent use. 6 to 8 weeks. Virginia committed to 8. The third was hydration, first thing, before coffee, before anything. A full glass of water the moment she sat up. During sleep, the body becomes mildly dehydrated. Dehydrated tissue is less elastic. Less elastic tissue produces more resistance, more friction, more of what Virginia felt in those first reluctant steps. 1 glass of water before the feet hit the floor. Every single morning. The fourth was a warm compress, 5 minutes on the knees and ankles before standing on particularly difficult mornings. Warmth increases local circulation and stimulates synovial fluid production in the specific joints that respond most slowly. Not a treatment, a preparation. Like warming up an engine before asking it to perform in the cold. 8 weeks, 4 habits. The 3-minute preparation on the edge of the bed became 90 seconds, then 60. The counting, which had been Virginia's private ritual for 2 years, stopped at 7. Then 6. Then one morning in late autumn, Virginia stood up from the edge of the bed and simply walked to the bathroom, without counting. She stopped in the doorway and realized she hadn't been counting. She stood there for a moment, surprised. Then she smiled and walked on. 4 things. Starting tonight. Move before you stand. 2 minutes of ankle rotations and knee bends while still lying in bed. Prime the joints before they carry the weight. Turmeric with black pepper before sleep. Half teaspoon in warm milk. Let it work overnight during the hours inflammation peaks. 8 weeks. Consistent. Every night. Water first. 1 full glass before coffee. Before anything. Rehydrate the tissue before the day begins. Warm compress on resistant mornings. 5 minutes on the joints that wake up slowest. A preparation, not a treatment. An act of kindness toward a body that has been asking for it. 4 habits. Starting tonight. Virginia told me something about the morning the counting stopped. She said, I stood in the bathroom doorway and I realized I had walked there without thinking about it, without preparing for it, without the number in my head. I had been carrying that number every single morning for 2 years, and when it was gone, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt normal, which is all I had ever wanted. Just normal, not extraordinary, not pain-free, not the mornings of a younger body. Just the ordinary miracle of walking from the bed to the bathroom without having to count your way there. Those 10 steps were never the price of getting older. They were a signal, persistent, specific, every single morning, waiting to be understood instead of endured. If Virginia's story felt like your morning, the counting, the preparation, the 3 minutes on the edge of the bed before the day could begin, don't scroll away. Leave a comment below. 2 or 3 words. Tell me about your first 10 steps. Because someone will read your words this morning, maybe sitting on the edge of their own bed right now, and feel less alone in the counting. Hit the like button if Virginia's story reached you. Subscribe to Strong Legs, Independent Life, every Tuesday and Saturday at 11 a.m. because the morning was never supposed to be the hardest part of the day. Keep smiling, keep moving, and never forget, you've got this.